At the end of this video, you'll be able to create a login form exactly like this with this video animation. So stay tuned as we get started. Welcome back. So here's my HTML file and my CSS file by the right. I've linked my CSS, and the next thing for us to do is to get started. So I'm going to create a div and I'm going to give it a class of general count. And in this we are going to have our video. You see this background that I see that is moving is actually a video that I used, and to be able to do that we're going to have our video tag. So we're not going to be using this src. We're going to have our source, then inside the source we're going to have our src. So we're going to navigate to the path. So here is the video. Also we're going to specify the type. So we're going to specify the type in the source that it is video/mp4. All right, now let's copy the path and view this in our browser. All right, so we can see this is the video, but as we can see, it's looking like a picture. It's not moving, nothing. So back to our code, we're going to add the autoplay to the video tag so it can start playing by itself. Also, we're going to add the loop so that when it's finished playing, that is when the video completes, it starts again. And we're going to mute it in case the video has a sound, we won't hear the sound. So when we refresh, we can see that the video is playing. But this now we want our video to look like, we want it to look exactly like this. And I have added a special sign so I can differentiate between the one we are working on currently. So this is the one I've worked on. You can see work done on it. Why this? There's nothing there. So now to be able to make this video to be able to look well and good, so we're going to go back to our code and we're going to be styling it. So in the body, we are going to have margin to be 0, padding to be 0, box sizing to be border box, and we're going to have overflow to be hidden. So now when we refresh, we can see the video has taken place. So now in our video tag, we'll discover that I'm going to call the video tag and I'm going to give it a style of height 50 VH. We'll discover that it will not move the way we want it to move. We reduce the height, but it's no longer filling the screen and it's no longer looking as we want it to be. So we're going to add a property known as width to be 100%. But this property will not take effect until we add another property known as object fit and cover. So when I refresh it now, it's going to take the full width. So we can just remove this height from it and let it take the full height. So we can see it has taken the full height now. So now the next thing, we want to add this navbar to our projects that we are building. So to do that, I'm going to have a div. So we're going to give it a class of navbar. So under this navbar, we're going to have 3 divisions. That is 3 div. So let me just have my 3 div. In the first div, we're going to have our image tag. So we're going to navigate to the image, and this is the image that we will be picking. And in the second div, this is what we're going to have in our text. So we're going to have our unordered lists, and under it we're going to have about 5 lists. So we're going to have the home, about, services, then products, and contacts and contact. And lastly, in the last div, we are going to have our sign up button, or sorry, our login button. So now when we refresh, we are going to discover that we are not seeing anything. Now to be able to sort that out, we are going to call this tag here. We're going to call this div by the class name, that is the general count. So I'm going to have it here .general count, and I'm going to give it a position of relative. Then I will call this div that holds my navbar. I'm going to call it .navbar. Then I'll give it a position of absolute and a top of 0. So now when we refresh, we can now see the navbar That is the one we gave a position of absolute. We should not forget our video should have a position of fixed. Now the next thing, we want these items to be aligned. It should be straight. So we're going to go to the nav bar and we're going to give it a display of flex so that the 3 division will be flexed. So when we refresh, we can see it flex the item. Then we also align the items. We also align the items to center. We refresh. So now the next thing, we can see our nav bar, the lists are straight. So to be able to do that, we are going to head on to our div, that is this div. So let me give this a class of div1, give this a class of div2, and also give this a class of div3. So we're going to head on to the div2 ul, and I'm going to give it a display of flex. So when we do that, we discover that it is straight now, but we can still see the dot on it. So to be able to remove that, we're going to head on to the div2 li, give it a display of inline block. So when we refresh it, we see that those dots has disappeared. All right, now let's change the color of this div2. Let's change the color to white. So gradually we're achieving this layout. So the next thing, this button, look at where it is. That is a sign up button. So we're going to head on to our div3 then we're going to say display flex, align items start, then justify content end. So if you don't understand what I did there, you can check out my video on CSS flex box. I already explained all these things. So when we refresh, okay, we're working on this. When we refresh, it's not taking effect. So we're going to head on and give the nav bar a width of 100%, and also we're going to call the div2, that is this .div2, and we're also going to give it a width of 100%. So we're going to give it a width of 100%. Now when we refresh, we can see the button is at the end. So we need to move this to the center. So we're going to call the .div2. We're going to move it to the center now by saying display flex, justify content center, and align the items to the center. So when we refresh it, we can see it at the center now. Now let's reduce this image here. So that is our div1, right? So we can see it here under the nav bar. We have the div1, and this is it. So we're going to head on to the div1, the image. So I'm going to reduce the width to about 60 pixels. So when I refresh it, now the width has reduced. Now we need the space to be around this our nav bar list. So we're going to head on to the list that is under our div2. We're going to head on to the list, right? And we're going to give it a margin right. Let's say about 8 view width. So when we refresh, we can see this there's space there that's space it for us. So now let's check. We can see there's space between the top and our nav bar. So let's give it a padding. So we're going to head on to the nav bar. I'm going to give it a padding of about, let's say, 15 pixels. So when we refresh, we can see the padding is around it now, but you can see this button is going inside. So that is the div3. You can see it is the div3 that is containing the button. So we're going to give it a margin right. I'm going to give it margin right of about 20 pixels. So when we refresh, it comes out. We can still increase it. So let's just say 27 pixels. Then now we can increase the font size of our list. So we can just say font size, let's say 10 pixels. Okay, let's increase that to 22. So we can see the font size now, it has increased. And also the font style need to change. So we'll be using monospace. Font style should be, font family. The font family should be monospace. So when we refresh, we can see it has changed. Now the next thing is to build this sign up like this. So we're going to head down to our sign up button. So that is the .div3. That is the div3, and we're going to call the button. So we're going to say padding should be, let's just say 5 pixel, 15 pixel, 5 pixel, and 15 pixel. So when we refresh, we see it. We're going to give it a border radius of 20 pixel. Yes, then we're going to give it a border of none. So let's refresh, so we can see login. So it should be sign up, so we refresh, we can see it now. It looks exactly like this. So we can still give this our navbar. We can increase the padding to about 20 pixel, so that when we refresh, it has enough space. After having our navbar, the next thing now is to build our sign up form. So now to build our sign up form, we have a div called general count, and we have our video, we have our navbar. So at the end of this navbar, we're going to have another div, which we are going to give it a class of sign up. Now this dot sign up, we're going to call it dot sign up. So let's just quickly give it a background of red. We're going to remove it just to trace what we are doing. Let's say height 20 pixel, and also width 20 pixel. So in order to be able to see it, you have to make the position to be absolute and the top to be 0. So when we refresh, we can see it here. So we need to move it to the center and move it here. So let's give it top of about 20 rem, then left of about 50%. So when we refresh it, we can see it's at the center because we gave it a left of about 50% and a top of about 22 rem. So let's change the height. Let's give the height 28 rem, and a width of 30 view width. So now let's refresh, so we can see it. Now we need to adjust the height and the left. So we're going to reduce this to about 10 rem, and let's see. So reduce to 10 rem, then we reduce the left also to about 30%. Okay, let's increase it a little to 35%. All right, so let's still reduce the top to about 9 rem. So now we see this is at the center now, where we are going to be working with it. So let's change the background to be RGB 1 2 3, then comma 0.5. So we gave it 0.5. So when we refresh, we can see the background now. So let's increase the opacity to about 0.7. I'm also going to give it a border radius of 8 pixel. So when we refresh, we can see it has taken effect. So let's increase the border radius to about 10 pixel. Now what is the next thing? The next thing is to have our login, then this input here. So we're going to have about 1 2 3 4 5 divisions in this sign up form. So div multiplied by 5. So we're going to have 5 division. In the first division, we're going to have our span that says login. Now in the second division, we're going to have our input, that is this division, and in this second division, we are going to have 2 divisions. That is the first division for the first input and the second division for the second input. So let's give this a class of sign1, then the next a class of sign2, then this a class of sign3, class of sign4, and this a class of sign5. All right, so in this sign2 we're going to have 2 divisions. So we're going to be having 2 division. The first division, we have the inputs to be email. So inputs to be email, and the placeholder should be email. All right, so we're going to give this class of inputs, input div, and a general class of elements. So I'm also going to give this a class of input div. So now this one will contain our password input. So we're going to have input, type will be password, and the placeholder is going to be password. So it has a class of input div. This is going to be, and it will have another class of element B. So we're going to call this element A. So don't be confused. In the sign up, we have the first div for the login, the second div for the input, which has two div, and the first div is for the input, which says email. Then the second div is for the input, which says password. So the third div we're going to be having here, we're going to be adding them as we continue. So now these icons we are seeing here, we're going to be getting them from our font awesome. So I'm going to head on to my browser and I'm going to search font awesome CDN. So as I'm searching for that, I'm also going to search for font awesome. So in the font awesome CDN, you see this link here. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to copy this link and add it to my HTML file. So I'm going to add it to my HTML file. So I'm going to have my link. Then I'm going in the href, I'm just going to paste it there. Then I'm going to head back to my font awesome. So if you don't have an account, you can create an account with them so that you'll be able to access so many icons. Most of the icons, they are free. So I'm going to be searching for envelope. So I'm going to search envelope. All right, so let's wait for the result. All right, this is the icon. I'm going to copy this icon, then I'll go back to my code. Then in the first input where I have element A, I'm going to paste it there. Then also I'm going to search for lock. Then I'm going to copy this also and I'm going to paste it there so we can see it. So I'm going to paste it here also, so I can close this for now. So let's head on to our browser so we can see the inputs and we can see the icons. So now, well, what we're going to do now, we're going to come to this div which says input div. So we're going to say dot input div. So the input div has two elements. So we're going to say display flex, justify content, center, align item center. Now after saying that, we're also going to move this sign to, we're going to move it to the center. So we're going to say dot sign to display flex, justify content center, align item center. So when we refresh, we can see it's in the center. So we don't need it to be everything to be on a straight line because we've added a flex to this sign too. So it's going to flex everything. So we're just going to change it and say flex direction should be column. So when we refresh, we can see the flex direction is column. All right, so we're also going to give it a height of 100%, so it can move this exactly to the center. Now before we come back to this, let's talk about our login here. So this login here, we're going to call it, that is the first sign, that is sign 1. So we're going to say dot sign 1. Then we're going to give it a display of flex, justify content center. Then I'm going to give it a color of white. I also increase the font size to about 18 pixels. So when we refresh, we can see the login here now. Then now we're going to give it a margin top of, let's say, 20 pixels. Let's increase this to about 20 pixels also. So when we refresh, it give it a margin of top. So this font size, we're going to give it to the span. So we're going to say dot sign1 span. So we are calling the span by the tag name, font size of, let's say, about 25 pixel. So when we refresh, or let's make it 3 rem. So when we refresh, we can see it. We need to reduce it a little to, let's say, 2 rem. So we can see login here. So all right, we're going to shift this our sign. We're going to shift it up a little. That is this div here. That is the sign 2. So we're going to give it a margin top of about minus 3 rem. So when we refresh, it goes up. Let's take it up a little. So now we can see it here now. So let's continue. Now we need to give space between the elements in the sign 2, that is between this and this div here. So we're going to give it a gap of about 30 pixel. So we're going to add a gap of 30 pixel. So when we refresh, we can see there's a gap between the two. So now let's come to the input itself. That is this input that we have. So but before that, we can see the icons we have from the font awesome. They have a tag name of I. So we're going to just call the tag name and give it a color of white and a font weight of 700. So when we refresh, we can see the icons has changed to white. Now we have input div to this general class. So we're going to call it dot input div. I'm going to call the input by name. So we're going to have a border of none and a background of none. So when we refresh, we can see no background, but when we hover on it, we can see some things around it. So we are going to change the outline to be none, so that when we focus on it, we'll not be seeing anything. Now we are going to give the, instead of giving the input a background and a border, we are going to give it to the div that contains these two elements. So that is the input div. So we are going to call the input div itself dot input div, and we're going to say border 2 pixel solid white. So when we refresh, we can see the border now. That is the input div that is the div that contains these two, the input and the icon. So let's increase the height a little. So let's say the height should be about 2 rem. Then let's say width 18, view width, then border radius about 20 pixel. So when we refresh, we can see it will increase the height a little and also change the border radius. Let's give this input a background of red so that we can see what is actually going on. So this is the input itself, while this is the icon. So we're going to increase the width of our input. So we're going to say width, let's say 18 VW. Let's remove this gap. Then reduce the width to about 15 view width. Okay, so after we reduce the width, we have it like this. So we can now take this background to be none. So when we refresh, we now have the email, and we can see it's perfectly okay like this. So we can have our email here, and we can also have our password here. So the next thing now we are going to be adding is this division, this remember me forget password. So now that will be in the sign 3. So we're going to have 2 divisions. The first division, we have an input that will be checkbox and a span of remember me. While the second division that will be in this sign 3, we have a span of forget password. Now we're going to call this sign 3 dot sign 3. We're going to give it a position of absolute and a top of 0, so we know where it is. So let's head on to our page. So we can see it here, remember me forget password. So we need to bring it to somewhere around here. So we're going to say the top should be about 20 rem. Let's refresh and see where it is. So we see where it is. We know we need to reduce it a little. So let's reduce this to about 17 rem. So we can see it here. Then we're going to give it a left, let's say 20%. Then when we refresh it, okay, we see it here now. Now the next thing for us to do, we need to flex all the items so that they will be on a straight line. So when we put a flex on this sign 3, this div and this div are going to be flexed on a straight line. So we're going to say display flex. So when we refresh, we can see them on a straight line. So let's give it a color of white. Color of white. Now they are not aligned, so we're going to say align items center. So when we refresh, you see that it aligns the items. But now in this sign 3, we have two division. This is the first div and this is the second div. So since those are the only div we have in the sign 3, let's just call it sign 3 div. So we're going to say display flex, justify content center. Then we're going to align the items also center. So when we refresh, we see that it is perfectly aligned. So now we need to space this. We need to push this towards the right, just as we can see here. I'm also going to reduce the font size. So first, let's reduce the font size to about 13 pixel. Let's refresh. All right, so let's increase it to 14 pixel. Sorry, 14 pixel. So we see it now. So this second div, we're going to move it to the right. So we're going to call the div, that is the second div. So let's give it a class of element C, element D, and this will have a class of element C, class of element C. So I'm going to call it by the class dot element D, element D. Then I'm going to give it a display. Sorry, I'm going to give it a margin left of about 20 pixel. So it's going to push it from the left to the right. So you see it pushes it. So let's increase it to about 30 pixel. All right, let's increase it a little to about 40 pixel. So we can see it here, just like this. So let's just increase the gap a little. So let's add a little gap to the sign 3. So let's add a little gap. So sorry, let's increase the top to about 17.5 should be okay. All right, you can see 17.5 is okay. Now when we check this, we have our email to be italic and our placeholder also. So we're going to go to the input we have, and we're going to change the font style to be italic. Then now we're going to call the input div, or the input div, we're going to call the input and are targeting the placeholder. So we're going to give it a color of white. So when we check it and we refresh, we see that the color changed to white, and also it is in italic form. So the next thing we want to have is this our login button. So we are going to have, that is in the division 4, that is the sign 4. We are going to have our button which is login. So now we are going to have sign 4 dot sign 4 dot sign 4. We're going to give it a position of absolute. Then the top should be a little under the sign 3. So let's just give it about 18 rem, and also a left of 20%. So when we refresh, we can see it here. So let's increase it a little to 19 rem. So when we refresh, we can see it here now. So we need to take it to the center. Let's increase our left. Or first, let's edit the button we are going to have inside. So the button dot sign 4 button. So we're going to have padding to be 5 pixel. Sorry, 5 pixel, 15 pixel, 5 pixel, and 15 pixel. All right, so now we check it, we can see the way it is. All right, so we're going to increase the width to about 200 pixel. So increase the width. Now the width is at 200 pixel. We're going to give it border should be none. We're going to give it a border radius of 20 pixel. So when we refresh, we see the way it looks like. So let's increase the height to about 20 or 30 pixel. Now we're going to increase the left also. Let's say 30%. So it's too much. So let's change to 25%. So when we refresh it, and it is at the center now. So let's increase the top a little. Let's say 19.5. So when we refresh, we can see we've increased the top. Now when we hover on it, we see how the cursor looks like. So we're going to come to it also, the button, and we're going to give it a cursor of pointer. So when we refresh and I hover on it, we can see the cursor is pointer. Now the last thing we'll have here is don't have an account register, and that will be in the last div here. So we're going to have a p tag which says don't have an account. So we're going to put this in a span and say register. So let's put our question mark here. So in the .sign5, we're going to call it .sign5. You remember how this class, you can give it whatever name you wish. So I'm going to say position absolute. We're using position absolute. Since we have they are relative to something, they are relative to this general count. So we're going to have our position to be absolute. So the top, we need it to be a little under sign 4. So I'm going to say 20 rem. Also, I'm going to say the left should be 20%. So when we refresh, we can see it here. So let me quickly change the color to white. So when I refresh, you can see it here. So let's increase the top a little to about 20.5 rem. So when we refresh, we see don't have an account register. So I'll make this 20.6. All right. So now this register, we can see the way it looks like. It is in italic form. So let me just change this to 21. Then, all right. So this should start from here. As you can see the design, the login button is starting from here. So I'm going to go to the login button and I'm going to take it back to 20% for the left. So we don't have an account register. So we're going to head on to the sign 5 span. That is it, .sign5 span. We're going to change the font style to italic and the font weight should be 700. So when we refresh, we can see don't have an account register. So we can have our email. So let's say johndoe@gmail.com. I can see when it gets here, it's not overlapping to the icon. And we also have our password here. The same thing is not overlapping to the icon. So please, if you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe and also hit the notification bell. You can check out my other video at the top. Thank you.